Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Vegan Movie Magic. My name is Ken Crater. Today's episode is Halloween 1 and 2, or why I still think that Rob Zombie sucks even though he's vegan. Today's actually my dad's birthday, even though he's no longer with us anymore. Miss you, Dad. As such, today we're going to start things off with a big vegan breakfast. Now, my dad wasn't vegan. I wish he would have been, but he wasn't. But I'm trying to veganize a breakfast that he would have made all the same. So it's basically what he would have made with the addition of being vegan. We're going to have a quick crypto update and kind of look at what's going on in that world and the market. Then we're going to jump right into the film analysis. Then we got a special Kung Fu treat, if you will, just a kind of a shout out that's loosely connected to the Halloween franchise. And then we're going to wrap everything up with a special how to prepare your area for a seance or magical practice for those of you who are going to do something stupid this weekend and try to evoke some spirits for Halloween. I don't recommend it, but if you're going to do it, there's safe ways to prepare your area so that you don't automatically start with a bunch of negative energy. So stay tuned. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that like button for me and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so that you can know whenever we're going to have a show. Also, a reminder that this is part one of a two-part episode, or a Halloween double feature, if you will. We're going to have the show today on the 29th, and then we're going to have the one coming out on Halloween on the 31st. So make sure you check out the next one as well, and that can only happen easier for you if you decide to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. My dad always liked to do a big breakfast on the weekends, so we're going to start off this weekend with a big breakfast. We're going to start with French toast. I'm just using French bread, slicing it up, and then we're going to dip it in Just Egg, a combination of Just Egg, oat milk creamer that I got. It's actually a little bit of vanilla to sweeten it up a little bit, and a little bit of cinnamon. Mix that up real good, and then we'll dip our pieces of toast in there and fry them up and get that all ready. In addition to the French toast, we're going to make an omelet. I'm using Just Egg here, so we're going to start with the Just Egg, lay that down, and then I'm going to put in a little bit of cheese as a foundation. Then I'm going to add the peppers and the tomatoes. Then we're going to add the mushrooms, the onions, and then the jalapenos, and probably a little bit more cheese on top because we want everything to fuse together nice. Cover it up with a lid so that that all melts together. While the omelet started, I'm going to start the Beyond Sausage links. I mentioned them in an earlier show, so I think this is a good opportunity to kind of showcase the Just Egg and the Beyond Sausage links, so you can kind of see how both rock. But I'm going to have 6 of them with my meal today so that I can get plenty of energy for the weekend. After everything's done cooking, get it loaded up onto your plate. At this point, you can decide for yourself if you want to have toast on the side. Make sure if you do, you use a vegan margarine or butter. In addition to that, I like to use maple syrup, 100% organic, for my French toast. And I like to have a little bit of orange juice in addition to some sparkling water, black cherry being my favorite. For the crypto market, let's go ahead and start with the DXY, the US dollar index. As you can see, we broke down below this line a while ago on the daily. It's come up several times, but it's yet to breach this line. Don't see much coming from the DXY, which is a good thing. If we get a breakout from here, though, you could see a little bit of bleeding in the stock market as well as Bitcoin. Total market looking pretty strong. We had this channel that was pretty strong for a while, and then obviously it broke to the downside, and then we had our dip, and that was obviously the Elon dip. But we have bounced back quite well. Breached the all-time high, but we haven't really broke out or stormed past the all-time high. We're getting a bearish cross on the MACD, but we are rounding up a bit, which could mean very good things. It could be something more like this or something more like this happening, where we're getting a little fake out. Kind of does look like this one here. So this could also just roll over, tag this line, and we could see it punch back up on the total crypto. Let's look at Bitcoin dominance. As you can see, Bitcoin dominance has lost a lot of traction throughout this most recent cycle in this run. Ethereum has definitely taken hold. However, we are adhering to this larger pattern here that I think it's very possible we could break out of this wedge and end up back as high as 72 if Bitcoin really starts going. If Bitcoin is to hit 100,000, we're going to see Bitcoin dominance take hold, and Ethereum's going to lose a lot of its footing. The alt market is kind of stuck in this wedge, and it started to come back down, but then it retested, and it's looking like it wants to try to break out of this wedge, which would be really good for a lot of the alts, obviously. DeFi market actually did break out and is retesting up here doing this little wedge, and we're not going to know what's going to happen until it happens. Ethereum is respecting this channel very, very calmly, hitting resistance right here at the all-time high. Need to get a breakout here, but we don't really have much volume. As you can see, we have our bearish divergence here. This is looking like we wanted to cross bearish, but it's decided it doesn't want to do that, which is a good thing. Down here on the RSI, still in neutral territory, but we are kind of pointing toward overbought, which once we get up in this zone here for Ethereum, we tend to be in danger of having a significant pullback. Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's doing this little wedge here. Did like a wedge earlier, and we had a breakout from that. No one can tell you what's going to happen in moments like this. It could come all the way back down and retest this line here for support. It could also break to the upside and go to the moon. We have no idea what Bitcoin's going to do until it does it, and that's kind of the nature of Bitcoin. I have a projection here. A lot of people have been talking about the potentiality for Bitcoin to go to 100,000. So or at least 100,000 by the end of the year. So here's the marker for December 31st. This line is what that represents. The 100,000 mark, where we're at now. And you can see we're doing these little rounded cycles. So I'm assuming here, this is not financial advice, that this has the potential to continue this pattern of adhering to this rounded bottom with these little dome-shaped rounded tops. Obviously, we could break to the downside right now. Bitcoin could go much, much lower and land on 10,000 and then freak everybody out even further by going to 2. I have no idea what's going to happen, and neither do you. We react to it. However, if you want to get an idea what might happen based on what is currently happening, that's the kind of chart this is. So it's a very, very strong maybe scenario. But if this was to continue, it does seem that we would breach 100,000 before the end of the year. So it does seem very possible according to the current charts that I'm seeing. Look at Aave real quick, a strong coin in the DeFi market, but Aave has been underbought in my opinion. It's very, very underpriced. I think Aave should be at least $500 a coin. Aave's day is coming. Aave's got a strong bottom. It's actually just in a giant bull wedge. Sol's been doing great, obviously. Everybody's been paying attention to Sol, so we could be seeing a cup and handle forming here, or we could break to the upside out of this resistance. You never know what's going to happen until it does. You just try to plan for what might happen. Have a plan for what you're going to do with your investment no matter what. So if it goes up, you're going to do this. If it goes down, you're going to do this. If it goes laterally, you're going to do this. This is on you, and you have to come up with what that is for yourself. Anchor, I think, is about ready to pop. Nice falling wedge, meeting a rounded bottom. Looking here at the MACD, it looks like the MACD is of the same opinion, and we are very neutral on the RSI. Link's been doing good, but at the same time, you know, it's kind of doing this cup and handle scenario as well, needing to break out of this resistance right here. Hot looks like it's about to pop too. Let's get rid of that. Also doing one of those cup and handle scenarios. This probably going to break to the upside to complete the handle portion of the cup and handle. And then once that happens, these typically go parabolic. Not saying that's going to happen, but saying that it might. DIA looking very similar. ICP, huge upside potentials on ICP. This is a top 30 coin ranking. Eventually, it's going to go. With these kind of coins like this, it's hard to say when. So we definitely have a consolidation wedge happening here, and we're doing okay right now, but it keeps breaking to the downside. So that's just something to take into consideration. If you're going to invest in ICP, you may be waiting a while, but it is bullish. Maybe even an Adam and Eve double bottom. But it's going to take time for it to consolidate. It's been consolidating for a while, so who's to say how long it's going to take. Dot looking real strong. As you can see, Dot's consistently bouncing off the 21 moving average, that white squiggly line there. See what I'm talking about? These are the moving averages. 21, 50, the yellow is the 200-day moving average. But these lines definitely have a bearing on what the price action does. And when I put this back, you'll see that the 21, we get over top of it and then we bounce. Fall down, bounce off of it again. Fall down, bounce off of it again. Fall down, fell below it. Now it's resistance. Got back over it, bounced, and now here we are again. We could break out of this resistance and test the all-time high, which is what I think Dot is going to do. Not financial advice. Definitely been a performer. I cannot see that it's not going to continue to be a performer. Let's go ahead and wrap it up right there. Don't want to take too much time talking about the marketplace and stuff. Care about your money. Don't be willy-nilly with what you do with it. Don't put it in your savings account so that the government can basically use it to make themselves rich and buy this stuff. Go and learn how to manage your money. All right, now that you've got breakfast behind you and under your belt, we can move on to the movies section of the show. Today we're talking about Halloween 1 and 2, and the show is affectionately referred to as Halloween 1 and 2, or Why I Still Think Rob Zombie Sucks Even Though He's Vegan. A real quick note on that. I actually don't think Rob Zombie sucks. He's awesome and his wife's awesome too. They're both vegans, and I actually think his music is pretty awesome. I've never had a problem with him musically at all. It's not my favorite music in the world. I'm a big fan of Pink Floyd and progressive rock, so obviously heavy metal doesn't really fall in the same category, but it's pretty progressive as metal goes, I suppose. It's a little bit more trendy maybe than I'm happy with, but that's just the personal opinion, whatever. The reason that I'm actually saying that he sucks today is because of his renditions of Michael Myers movies, in particular Halloween. I did not like the way he represented the characters. I didn't like his take on the whole thing. I think he kind of misses or deliberately stomps on the original idea of the movies and does this trashy, comes from squalor, crappy parentage scenario Mike Myers slasher film that just honestly fits too in line with the ones that were already made in the 70s to actually be fresh and new and interesting, in my opinion. The reason John Carpenter's was so cutting edge is because he put on a spin that most people weren't doing at the time. In fact, nobody had done it at the time, and that's what actually inspired the other movies that would follow it. To really start talking about Halloween, though, we have to really talk about genre for a second, because Halloween is guised as a psychological thriller, but in truth, it's actually a flat-out horror film. The reason for that is very specific things that happen throughout both movies. They're a lot more subtle in the first movie, but in the second movie, they just throw subtlety out the window, and they really rub your face in it. But we'll get to that in a little bit. To start with, let's talk about genre in film. Now, I have a particular thought about this. Many other people may not agree with what I'm about to say, but this is my opinion. There are only 3 genres in film, and everything else is a subgenre or a movie essentially about absolutely nothing. And when I say nothing, I don't necessarily mean without theme or plot. Without plot to speak of is what I mean. So let's imagine you have a movie that's about a guy who gets up in the morning and he goes to work, and his day is pretty basic, nothing out of the ordinary happens, nothing too crazy, and then he goes home and he makes himself dinner, and then he overate a little bit, so he's going to sit down and watch some TV for a few hours, and after that he decides to go to bed and wake up and do it all over again. That's a stupid movie. Nobody cares about that. Now, you could make a movie about that, and you could do some really incredible stuff with the editing, cinematography, mise-en-scène, and sound to make this the most spectacular version of that dumb thing that I just said. Or, typically that's going to be something where, like, people are, who cares? Why would anybody want to watch a movie about somebody doing something that everybody does every day? That's not what a movie is supposed to be. So in film, you're going to typically see narrative fiction broken down into one of 3 categories: noir, horror, or science fiction. Real quick, I want to kind of make a sub note on noir. I'm not talking about films noir, the term that was coined by Nino Frank in the 40s regarding particular crime films that came out in that era that were shadowy and dark. I'm talking about all crime films, from gangster movies of the 1920s and 30s to Hitchcock movies, but also every crime film that ever comes after. Everything is now called noir. That's just a terminology that we all need to accept. If you're talking about crime film, person-on-person crime, you're talking about noir. So noir is just any criminal activity in the film. If there's nothing supernatural or nothing that is inside the realms of science fiction, you're going to have a film that is inherently a noir film. Horror, on the other hand, is something that requires the supernatural, unlike noir. So just because a person decides to flip out and start chopping people up in little pieces and eating them doesn't necessarily mean it's a horror film. It means that it's a horrible thing that you see somebody doing in that movie, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything that's causing that to happen that isn't every day. A good example of a horror film versus a psychological thriller would be the Silence of the Lambs. In the Silence of the Lambs, you have no actual horror happening in the entire film whatsoever. You have the reference to cannibalism, but cannibalism takes place. It happens throughout the world still today, so I don't know how much of a horror I would call it, considering it's something that's very real. Yes, it's horrible, and I don't ever want to, personally encounter it myself, but that doesn't make it horror in a film. With horror, you have to have something that is an outside element of the supernatural. A good example of that would be The Shining. Throughout The Shining, you have a psycho thriller throughout. It's this person, he may be losing his mind, other people may be going crazy too. There's nothing that says they're not going crazy, and then there's the moment that Grady opens up the pantry and lets Jack out. That's the moment that that movie becomes a horror film, because that's the moment that something happens that's outside the realms of possibilities, because the only person that could let Jack out isn't there. And that person is the person who put Jack in that room, so she wasn't going to let him out. So there was no way that that was Shelley Duvall come back downstairs and just absentmindedly open that door back up for Jack after he asked. Jack contacted something from the other side. That something from the other side rose to the occasion, opened up the door to let him out to go chop up his wife and kid. That's something from the supernatural. When Steven Spielberg throws a tennis ball into the ceiling and it comes out the other side, that's something from the supernatural. These movies are horror films because of this. It's something that we don't understand from a dimension that we don't get and we're kind of afraid of. And that's what makes it so scary on a deeper level. With science fiction, it's a little bit easier to identify because you usually have this element of science that's present in order to be deemed this. A good example is Frankenstein's monster. A lot of people see that as horror, but the actual premise of the show is a doctor that's trying to do something scientifically. He manipulates some elements of science to work for the narrative and creates this monster. Obviously, this is one of the most people would say this is probably one of the most known horror films of all time, but the truth of it is, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is not a horror film, it's science fiction, 100%. Obviously, in Halloween, we're talking about a science fiction film because there's that part where the aliens come down, take Michael Myers to another planet, and then they put a bunch of metal parts in him and give him the ability to shoot lasers out of his eyes. That didn't happen. That's right. We're talking about a noir film. Oh, nope, that's right. There's something different about this movie that makes it so that we're not talking about noir and we're not talking about science fiction. But if we're not talking about these, we must be talking about horror. But what is the horror here? We're just talking about an escaped lunatic who's out chopping up kids. That's terrible, and I hope that never happens, but that's not something that couldn't happen. It's not something that if it did happen, people would be like, this was obviously the work of demons. I'm sure somebody would say that, but most people would say this is the work of a lunatic. Going back in the 1970s, we have a lot of slasher movies where some lunatic in a camp or a hospital or somewhere else decides to start stabbing a bunch of his friends or peers or other people or whatever or whoever. These are pretty common and it becomes a thing. And I would say the thing that drives these movies are the jump scares. The thing that kind of keeps people going to these films is that they're kind of tongue-in-cheek in the whole approach to the whole genre. Nothing's really supposed to be or is ever really that scary in these films. And I would say that the most frightening ones and the weirdest ones are the ones that are actually not trying to be scary, like Alice, Sweet Alice, which maybe we'll do a review on Alice, Sweet Alice in the future. I'm marking that in my mind. For Halloween, it's a little bit different. With Halloween, there's something about it that makes it a little bit scarier because we see something happen And the first couple of times we see it, it's so subtle, we're just kind of like, that was weird. But it takes us a little bit in the first Halloween to notice what's happening. In Halloween 2, where they're hitting you with snowballs of it in your face. You're just getting pelted with this idea. And that's that Michael Myers cannot die. Early in the film, in fact, I believe in the first 12 minutes of the film, it's pretty much exactly established what's going on in the movie by Dr. Loomis, who also in this moment establishes himself as the wizard of the movie. He's the one that understands more than anybody else in the narrative, at least in part 1. At the beginning, he actually mentions flat out that Michael Myers has inhuman patience and that there's nothing about him that's even remotely considered to be human. Very shortly later on, he tells the police officer that the person that they are looking for is not a man. The reason that this is interesting in the movie is because what the movie is doing is it's setting you up to see that the person of science in the movie, the person that is a doctor that's supposed to approach things from a scientific perspective, has completely abandoned science in this moment. In this instant, when it refers to Michael Myers, Dr. Loomis is of the opinion that Michael Myers is completely without reason or any kind of governing sensibilities that would actually help a person understand the difference between right and wrong or stop them from committing murder. He is not even suggesting that he is crazy or deranged or sick. He is suggesting that there is nothing there to be sick, crazy, or deranged, and that what you are dealing with is a demon or a complete fluke in nature, something spawned from hell. Obviously, the movie is not very subtle in the way that it has Dr. Loomis continuously reiterating that Michael Myers is not just a lunatic and not just crazy, but this inhuman, monstrous thing. The movie is, however, pretty subtle regarding Michael Myers' inability to die. This is constantly echoed after Laurie starts fighting back, and we see that every time an element is introduced to Michael Myers that puts him on the ground, he seems to overcome it and get right back up no matter what it is. Now, obviously, about halfway through the movie, when we start seeing things done to him, this is a little bit different because when these things are happening to him, they're happening from a teen girl who's kind of getting lucky on some of these shots. She hits him with a sewing machine needle, then she uses the coat hanger to twist into a device to hit him in the eyeball, and which is also very, very cool. But these things are kind of things that catch Michael Myers off guard. And when they catch him off guard, it drops him, and you can't really tell if he's playing dead, if he actually passed out, did he die, or is he just like dazed. It's kind of hard to determine. Obviously, he keeps getting back up, so we just kind of naturally assume Michael Myers is just getting wounded by Laurie in all these attempts. But then Loomis enters the picture at the end of the movie, pulls out the gun, puts 5 shots into him, and sends him out the window. He should be dead now. Then Loomis walks back over to the window just to find that he got up and walked away again. This is when the movie stopped being horror, or stopped being noir rather, and completely embraces horror and lets you know that what we're dealing with here is not something that's human at all. It's something that has the ability to be superhuman, some evil thing, or a particular type of thing that's been inhibiting the particular kid that the movie is about, Michael Myers. Growing up, me and my dad always watched Halloween 1 and Halloween 2. I always kind of considered them the same movie, and they're both written by John Carpenter. He doesn't direct the second one, and he doesn't actually have too many incredibly nice things to say about the second one, but I'm not really sure what his problem is because they play so well together. The movie actually kicks off exactly where part 1 left off, and it's just a continuation of the same night. So I've always considered it the same story, and it makes sense because we have this better circle or story arc that follows Michael Myers from him beginning in this mental institution, in this hospital. He escapes, and then it all comes back around to him essentially breaking into a hospital to try to kill Laurie. The combination of the two movies helps emphasize that Mike Myers has no self-preservation whatsoever, that he never escaped the hospital because he was trying to escape anything. He simply left. He left, and then he went and tried to kill his sister, and that was the only thing that he cared about, was killing his sister. This is actually one of the aspects of the film that sort of pushes it back into the realm of psycho thriller, because his connection to his sister and his pursuit of her being his main motivation makes it seem very psychological. But the fact that he can't be killed and that there was no motivation or reason for him wanting to kill her that she ever did, other than the fact that it just seems like unfinished business that he needs to do, there's no real reason for him to do it. His upbringing is actually illustrated very clearly as something that's status quo, good upbringing. He has normal parents, and there's nothing about it that's bad. This is where Rob Zombie obviously completely flips things on us and takes it right back 10 years to earlier slasher films, where that's exactly the case, where it's about some lunatic that was created by a set of circumstances rather than a lunatic that may have been born that way, or a person that may have been born normal and then on Halloween night something spectacular happened to them. We'll get more into that next time though. Magic this Halloween. Should you decide that you're going to do a seance or something with your friends, play with a Ouija board, make sure that you're not succumbing to negative energies. The best way to do that is to clean the area that you're going to be doing magic in. You're going to need to get a broom, probably a witch, or a wizard, or somebody that knows what they're doing so that they can help you with this, but they'll need a broom. They'll need some salt, possibly some fire. Now, the area that you're going to be working in, you're going to want it to be clean, so you're going to want to sweep or vacuum it out completely first. Then you're going to take a broom specifically designed for magic practices, and you're going to sweep in a motion, a counterclockwise motion, making your way out of the room toward a door. Once you get to the door, you're going to sweep the energy out. With salt, you're going to want to use sea salt, and you're going to basically just sprinkle it around the perimeter of the room, but you're going to want to consecrate it first because you want your sea salt to be cleaned as well. You don't want to use salt that's not consecrated because salt has properties that will absorb energy. So salt just sitting around can actually naturally absorb negative energy. So that's why people have salt lamps and stuff, and they're very effective for cleansing an area. Once the area is cleaned and swept, then you can take a candle, light it, and then walk around your space and kind of expel any of the negative energies, or enact your will and your intent on the area to bring in positivity and such. You can also go the full 9 and actually just do a smoke cleanse to your house. Now, if you go this route, make sure that you do an actual smoke cleanse. Look up the ingredients and the stuff that you want to burn for a smoke cleanse to cleanse your house of any negative spirits or negative energy. If you use white sage to do this, you're not actually going to do what you're looking to do. White sage doesn't get rid of spirits or anything. Native Americans used to use white sage and burn it for spiritual reasons, but it wasn't for the same purposes of cleaning an area. So understand that's something that's been taken out of context from their culture, and it is definitely something that has its place. But if you're wanting to burn white sage for the practices of smudging, that's something you want to look into separate from smoke cleansing. They're not the same thing. For the Kung Fu aspect of today's show, it was a little bit tricky because it was hard to kind of connect any Kung Fu to what's happening with Michael Myers. You can make a strong case that Laurie practices Kung Fu throughout the whole movie. She never gives in to fear. She always fights back. No matter what the situation is or how paralyzed by fear she seems to be, she always has one little last moment where she has something left in her to hand to Michael Myers so that she can get away one more time. That never giving up spirit. That's pretty cool, and that's pretty confluent with Kung Fu. Although what I'm about to talk about isn't technically martial arts and Halloween, there is a loose connectivity. Many people know that the mask famously worn by Michael Myers is actually a mask of William Shatner. And did you know that William Shatner is actually a practicing martial artist? Well, I don't know how practicing he is today, considering he and Kathleen Turner look like they're part of a science fiction experiment to become the same person. Neither one of them really looks like they get out and do too much yoga. That's all I'm saying. However, back in the day when he was Captain James T. Kirk, he did some karate. And he also studied various other martial arts as well. And he had at one point at least 2 years of karate under his belt, studying under somebody who actually knew what they were doing. And when you're rich and you can study like that, we're probably talking about like daily 2-hour lessons and stuff when he's in his prime. That was probably his workout. So William Shatner actually knows some Kung Fu. Despite the fact that Michael Myers is walking around like an idiot with a giant knife, he's wearing the mask of somebody that if they were there trying to kill people, they'd be doing a much more efficient job. kind of lost my point there and it turned into lunacy. Happy Halloween. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for today's show. I hope you guys enjoyed today's show, and make sure you tune in a couple of days to the Halloween special that's actually going to continue this one, and we're going to get more into Halloween 1 and 2, show some actual points in the movie that emphasize and back up my idea on which motif specifically from the horror genre that Halloween is adhering to.